Hello, everyone. This is Tim Selden, and this is Finding the Perfect Match, the weekly webcast from the Montessori Foundation, usually co-hosted with Clint Lausch of Ames, or Grosweet as he likes to call it. And this is all about recruiting and retaining the right families and building a school community and anything at all connected to the practical and esoteric issues of building a great school community. This week's topic is how to create the right marketing message for different age levels, assuming your program is more than infants or toddlers or early childhood. That, obviously you don't communicate to a parent of a middle school student the same way you would to an early childhood. So how do you explain who you are, or how do you explain Montessori to different prospective audiences? Before I get started, does anyone have anything that you want to bring up or add in for the record that you want to talk about?
I would just, if we have a chance, like to discuss a little bit about inclusion and how it is both positive and negative in terms of maintaining a school and it
Sure.
and what it stands for. Yeah.
Well, I think that first off, I just wrote a big essay about this. And if you go to LinkedIn, and I think if you also go to the Montessori Foundation's blog, I think you'll find the essays there. But on LinkedIn, I'm getting a lot of debate and comments and so forth. I'm finding that to be a
Hmm.
very interesting platform to feed stuff. By the way, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm generally posting between 1 and 5 new articles a week.
Wow.
Um, so there's a lot of content going up there. As I get older, I have more time to write, and I'm just belting it out. Um, Marco, in answer to your question, I think that number one, there is a general misunderstanding of what Maria Montessori actually wrote, said, and did. And it basically goes, Montessori is right for every child. Well, yeah, Montessori is right for every child, but that doesn't mean every classroom or every program is designed for every child. The principles that are Montessori can be applied to any age level, from the neonatal environment or even the birth center. There's a Montessori way of birth. Um, Jacques Le Boyer, you may know Birth Without Violence as an example, and it goes all the way up to end of life or dementia. I think of Cameron Camp and some of the others that are doing elder care. That doesn't mean that the same classroom can meet the needs of every child. Again, I'm a great believer. Let's be careful about not getting rigid. I have seen people raise, children in environments where there are 2-year olds to 14-year olds in the same room. I don't recommend it. It's not that the kids can't handle it, it's that the parents usually won't tolerate it. And the average teacher doesn't know what to do with it. I mean, but can it be done? Of course. To the idea of, for example, that elementary is divided between lower elementary and upper elementary is a fairly recent invention. There is no strict rule about this. Multi-age classrooms are true. Does it have to be 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12? Could it be first and second graders or K1? I mean, I prefer to have my kindergartners in with my 3 and 4-year-olds. But do you want to keep first graders in with them? Sure, you can do that. Again, not every teacher knows what to do. But can it work? Of course it can work. So that's number one. Number two, can we meet the needs of a wide range of children? The answer is absolutely yes. Does every child deserve to have an environment that is developmentally a good match for them, personality wise, in terms of their strengths and the areas where they need the most support? Again, absolutely. Should the Montessori teacher be able to meet the needs of most children? The answer is yeah, absolutely. In theory, they should. Are they actually able to do it? I don't know. That's a different story. Some people say that today's kids are different than yesterday's kids. Now, I'm old enough at 80 that I can tell you the kids that I had in the early 60s are not very different from today's kids. It was Davy Crockett and Cowboys and Indians, and you know, I went through video games and marijuana, and social protests and dropouts and free life, you name it. I've seen it all. Uh, so yeah, are today's kids different? Sure. French kids are different from American kids. Dutch kids are different from both. Today's kids are different from the kids that I knew when I was a little kid, but kids are kids are kids. We are biologically the same thing. Are there more kids that are neuroatypical? I don't know. We're certainly better at spotting them. In my day, we didn't even have terms for this kind of stuff. And I went to a school that was pretty sophisticated in terms of brain research and psychoanalysis. We had a resident school psychologist, but we didn't talk about learning disabilities. Um, I don't know that we didn't even know what dyslexia was. We just knew that kids learn differently. In my essay, I talk about how I was born with dyspraxia. I am one of those kids that never learned to ride a bike, never could learn to touch type. I cannot dance for the life of me. I mean, I'm really silly at a wedding and a dance floor. But I learned to ride a horse at 4, and I became a barrel racer and a polo player, so I can clearly do something. But handwriting at a school where every single kid was expected to have a beautiful cursive hand, I don't think so. So I think the issue of can every classroom meet the needs of every child, in my opinion, a large part of that is fantasy or wishful thinking. And it's not black or white. It's don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't ask your teachers to bite off more than they can chew. And so the whole idea is help teachers to become the best they can. Just as we watch newborn babies when we're giving them a bath, are they turning blue? Are they turning red? Are they shrinking away from the water? In other words, you're trying to follow the child, you're trying to pay attention. Is it working for you? Is it working for them? If it's not, beating yourself up about it is probably not a good choice. Beating your teachers up because they can't do it all, probably not a good idea. We've got enough teachers that are feeling underpaid and underseen and underappreciated. And so I think what we're trying to do is to figure out what can we do. And I really appreciate people like Maria Ava Chapin and Ann Epstein and Christine Lowry, just to name three, who are really trying to help Montessori educators, and of course Joyce Pickering and Shelton School, lots of people out there that are trying to help Montessori teachers, Montessori schools to do more for more kids. I mean, to me, that's common sense. On the other hand, it's got to be done consensually. If your teachers freak out, you're not accomplishing anything by shoving it down their throats. And I also think that we have to remember that taking a child into your school, whether a big school or little school, is like adopting a child into your family. What are you going to do? Send them back to the pound? I mean, once they're in, they are part of you. So, it's not that you've got to hang on to them at any price, but divorce is painful. It is painful. So the goal is figure out whether or not you are a good match for each other before you get married is the idea. Because it's better to help them find the right place or to admit that you're not going to be able to meet their needs than to have the dear John, breakup scene if you feel like you just can't meet the child's needs. Now, having said that, all of us have had kids that, the family came in and they told us a story and it sounded great. Kid came in, the kid seemed fine, and 3 months later, we're pulling out our hair. We've all seen it. And sometimes it doesn't happen then, it happens later. I mean, I think of a young man in my son Mark's class who started when Mark and he were 2.5, and something went wrong about 8. And this kid flipped out. He became violent. He became cruel. He stopped doing any work. And it was just terrible. He was just ripping the teachers apart. Now, by the way, he passed through it. He was able to stay and finish, but it was not easy. So if we go back to the idea that people are complicated, that it's not easy to spot this stuff, that people take a lot of work, and we want to do the very best we can with the people we've got. We also want to ask, are we the right fit? Is this parent going to really work with us through good times and bad right from the beginning, or are we just going to be bashing each other up? So I'm not sure, Margot, if that really answered your question, but I hope it did.
It starts to get there. It's much more involved, but certainly starts to get there. And it's a nice overview of it.
I would love to hear more because we can make this a great topic.
Well, I coming from an administrative background, because I've not been in the classroom, I've only done the administrative things. Um, I think there's a very fine line to walk between being known as a Montessori school that follows Montessori principles, obviously, and cares for each child, all the good things, and being so inclusive that you can literally exclude yourself out of the market because you become something you're not.
Yeah.
And most Montessori schools are relatively small. Do they have the wherewithal in terms of salaries and that kind of thing to employ 10 million, specialists? No, most people don't. They're lucky if they have one. So I think that inclusion, while it's good, and I think we need to take a look at it, I think we have to be careful of it in terms of what it can do to the school.
Well, sure. I mean, most Montessori schools today, and this is not new, by the way, in the 60s, we were seeing this. Every pediatrician was
Right.
referring every child who was a
Yeah.
little bit weird to
Yes.
Montessori schools. So what we end up with is pretty mixed bag of kids at 3 and 4, although we certainly see the ones who seem to not be able to make it in other schools, or whose parents are worried that this child has a language delay or something. But by kindergarten, you're seeing an exit out to other schools, if not before, and you're ending up with two kinds of kids that are left. The groupies, the true believers in Montessori, I guess it's three, the weird kind of kids who are not neurotypical, they're just different.
Walks a little different.
A
Yes.
little different. They're quirky.
Yeah.
I remember I said that once to someone at my school, and she really was upset that I would say that the kids that we bring in are quirky. And I like quirky kids. I think they're great. And then the third is these children who they're fine, but they are kids who are in need of additional support and who can be a challenge to our school. So it used to be in Barry, we would say we can take 3 kids in a class of 30 who are what we would call children with some kind of learning differential. Um, but as you get more and more, most classes will begin to become overwhelmed, if not collapse.
Mhm. Well,
And
Tim, excuse me, because I will tell you that that is the first time I have heard anybody say that there needs to be, in essence, a numerical limit. And taking a look at it administratively in terms of how it affects not only the classroom and the teachers and the school. That is the first time I have heard anybody say it. Even when pushed to give an answer, they haven't.
I think a lot of people do feel it. I see Renee, you're shaking your head. Any
Mhm.
memories from your years?
Yeah, so thank you. So, Margot, I love what you asked because nobody says the number. We always used a rule of 10%.
Mhm.
And we say that up front to parents that, we aren't a learning support school,
Right.
but
Right.
we can support many, many children, and our goal is to support as many as we can. And I think it's really important that schools put in the child study program. Um, I don't know if any of you know it. I think the term child study is kind of being pushed more by Elizabeth Slade, but it's a phenomenal process about, and it's exactly what Montessori is. It's about observing the child and partnering with parents when you see observations. Say to the, and they have several forms that say, what are the observations that we're seeing? What are the strategies that we're using in the class? And involve the parents really early.
Mm.
And then you always give the document signed by both that we met, so everybody has a copy of it. And halfway through the year, there may be some children who can't continue. That's
Yeah.
not our goal, is to counsel out. Our goal is to keep kids and support them. But it's a great system and tool to use because it's a really hard thing to try to counsel a child out. It's not in our blood, but
Right.
we also can't have too many of those children in a classroom whose needs are beyond what the teachers can meet. And
Right.
we have to be not afraid to say that. Our teachers are general ed teachers, they're not special ed teachers. And I
Right.
know Christine Lowry might not like this, but I agree with everything she says, but you have to have the number that Tim just said. I believe it's 10%. Tim said 3 in 30, that's 10%.
10%.
So,
Yep.
Yeah.
and I've
Yeah.
been saying this for 25 years, so it hasn't changed. You can't have more.
I'm going to
And you
say for
can't meet
50.
everybody, you just can't. And what we want to do is meet the children we have and do the best job to help them reach their potential, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, my friend Brianna Reddick is at the Maria Montessori Institute in London right now. And I think yesterday or the day before, she posted a video where she was saying, she was reading something and listening to a lecture, and they were reminding the people taking the course. And Maria Montessori said, the children who are in the children's house are not the same as the children in the orthophrenic school, and each has a different need and a different program. And that's really important for her. That was a wake up call, and that triggered the essay that I wrote, I think, yesterday. And it is
Tim, will
getting a
you
lot of.
repeat that again, what you just said? Maria Montessori said what?
Okay. So first off, if you want more detail, go to my LinkedIn profile. And
Okay.
I wrote an article in response to Brianna Reddick of Tiny Cabin Montessori. She's at the Maria Montessori Institute in London, the AMI Institute. They
Yeah.
have a special course going on right now on basically meeting the needs of children with
Oh, really?
exceptionality.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that lecture, um, the lecturer, whose name is Lynn, and I don't remember her last name right off the top of my head, I think it's Lynn Livingston, points out that in multiple sources of Maria Montessori and the people who work with Montessori,
Hmm.
they point out that the children of the orthophrenic school had needs that were different from the children of the children's house. Now, the children of the children's house were, by some standards, children with challenges that are as profound as any of us see today. I mean, their parents were generally illiterate. Uh, Many of them were alcoholics. Uh, Very, very traumatic environment these kids were living in. They were seeing rape and murder and fights in the street. They were walking over dead bodies to get to school. San Lorenzo at this time was a former slum, but the community that had been placed within it was shall we say, an evolving, they basically took a group of indigenous people and attempted to reform them by giving them handwork jobs. And then they wanted the kids off the street who were too young to go to public school. Now, the children of the orthophrenic school, we don't really know what their diagnoses were. Our
Hmm.
best guess is they were schizophrenic, they were autistic, they may have had cognitive delays. We don't know for sure. Um, but the bottom line is Montessori pointed out in the original book, the Montessori Method, and in various other books like Pedagogical Anthropology, Montessori says we need to understand that the techniques that we are evolving are intended to be used uh, for populations within which or for whom they are a good fit. And they're different populations, age groups, and other backgrounds to situations where the same technique or the same environmental design may not be appropriate. Smaller class sizes, less stimulating, and so forth. The very thing that I think all of us who have run a school have seen before, what you're saying, Renee. So I think the point is there are people, there's a whole movement in Montessori that is saying Montessori is right for every child. And partially because of the number of government supported schools where you got to deal with the children that you're given. And it's quite a process to get children moved from your class to another class. And the general belief now is inclusion, which means we're not going to have separate classes for children with exceptionalities. We're going to bring in supports into the classroom, or we're going to pull the children out to have access to shared resources. And as Margot, you said, most of us aren't running schools that are big enough to have those kinds of supports. And even those that have access to it, for example, in Sarasota County, Montgomery County, Maryland, we had certainly public schools that did diagnostics, they had language therapists, OT therapy, but getting those people in connection to the child was typically, quite the effort. It could take a year. Often the family had to transport the child away from the school to the place where the therapy was provided, or if the therapist was going to be provided by the public schools, it was going to be, shall we say, thin on the ground. When they feel they have someone available, they would send them in, and you have to provide a space where the child can get therapy. So it's not the same as, for example, Elizabeth Academy or Shelton School are great examples of major resource rich environments to support children with exceptionalities. So if you had the endless money, you could do a heck of a job. But right at the moment, we are being encouraged to believe that whether you're in a public or a private school, to be Montessori is to welcome every child. And I think, Margaret, that's what you were questioning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tim,
Because
can I
it's
ask a quick question?
Yeah, and I think
oh,
today's topic is this.
Okay. I'm sorry I got here a little late. I missed if there's any specific parameter on this 10% of the classroom. Does it include ADHD? Is it all neurodiversities? Is
Oh.
it I missed that part, so I'm really sorry.
You didn't miss much, Lisa, because I didn't specify.
Right, right.
I think, again, each one of us who has had experience with this will have our own perspective. Here's mine. The first question is, can this child in a particular classroom, the mix of children that are there already, the skill set and the attitude of the teachers, and the needs of the child, are they a good match? And I think that is very much an individual one-on-one puzzle piece question. So I have dealt with children who are blind. I've dealt with children who are in wheelchairs. I've dealt with children who had Down syndrome. I mean, I went to school with children back in the 50s and 60s, really the 50s, who had Down syndrome. And they were able to be included in our classrooms. But for me, at least, I can't tell you what my mother's thought was before I came along. But at Barry, I was one of those kids. I mean, I think I started before you joined talking about me and typewriters and the fact that in an age when every single child had a beautiful cursive hand, mine looked like a chicken scratch. And my teachers convinced my mother to go out and buy me a little lightweight portable typewriter, Hermes Rocket, back in the days before computers, before electric typewriters. This was a 3-pound typewriter, a non-electric. And I carried that little sucker around from kindergarten through the end of Georgetown University. And that's how I learned to write. I still can't write worth a damn. So I think, again, I'm very sensitive to this. I've got 5 kids that I've raised, all of whom had some going on, like Caitlin, who now has an MBA, did not learn to speak until she was 6 and did not learn to read until she was 8.5. Now, were we worried? Yeah. Um, did she do it? Yeah. I can't tell you we gave her great support. We gave her the gift of time. And I'm a great believer in the gift of time.
Right,
But what I don't want to do is have my teachers collapsing because of my um, belief that they ought to be able to do it.
right, right.
Renee, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Lisa, I think that the capacity of each classroom has to be looked at every single year because children grow and change, right, and develop. Um, and what can the teacher handle? I mean, I'm a big proponent in my last 10 years, better than I was in my first 20, of involving teachers in that and saying, here's 3 children we're looking at. Can you work with this child in your classroom? Because we want to, and I think in general, most teachers want to. And we have to think about the other children in the classroom and the
Yeah,
experience they have. If there's a child that can't work within the, as Tim said, environmental design of the Montessori classroom, that's not fair to the other 20 kids, right? Who can. And last is we also looked at the parent or family needs in the classroom.
mhm,
Some class placement's a tricky thing, and some teachers and parents' families are challenged to work together in their communication styles. And so that's another add-on that you can't keep adding more and more and more because everybody's going to suffer. And we want those harmonious classrooms with the sense of order, right? And beauty that is why we do what we do.
Well said, Renee. I would like to add one thing onto that.
Sure.
The design of the Montessori classroom, I would argue that there's multiple ways to design Montessori classrooms, including ways of modifying a Montessori classroom that is meant for neurotypical kids to make it more accommodating to children who are, shall we say, a little antsy, who need to move around. I mean, things that really are simple accommodations that are probably good for everyone, certainly would have been good for me. Um, but there's also the way you design a Montessori classroom for teenagers, or the way you would design it for a group of children who are hyperkinetic. If you want to run a school for children who have dyslexia, you're going to make not only, again, the question is, are we doing inclusion or are we doing design?
right.
And there's no wrong answer. So the point I'm trying to get at is we don't want to get into the idea that there is a correct way to do a Montessori prepared environment. There's a typical pattern that we're used to seeing, and even that, it's a lot of different people have different ideas, but there's also other designs. For example, the Elizabeth Academy, they have a design that works well for what they're trying to do, and I have great respect for it. And it is Montessori. It's just not what I would normally do. My hyperkinetic dogs are all barking, which you probably can't hear at the moment. Anyone have any thoughts here?
I was wondering if, when you're looking at what is sort of common between the different levels in Montessori, or what is it that brings the coherence to Montessori education. Again, I had experience in the adolescent level, having trained at the farm school or whatever. And then I saw the kids coming up to us in the adolescent program from the Montessori. And I had been teaching in public and private schools before that. So I'd never really been in a Montessori environment. And, the difference I saw in the adolescents coming into us was so profound that I said, I've got to learn about this and how does it work? And so I'm in the doctoral program now at University of Wisconsin, River Falls. And part of my research has to do with relationship and how relationality is such a key element. I did training in children's house as well. Just finished an overview with Martha Torrance in that. And I'm looking at part of what we're learning in the doctoral program is the different methodologies that you can use. You can either have quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, or whatever. But I've also had the opportunity to learn that there are other ways of looking at what knowledge means and what knowledge is. And one of those things is indigenous research methodologies. And because their whole um, sort of way of being is relationship. Everything is relationship. And so our traditional ways of doing academic work and research is very different from their own. So they're creating new approaches to doing research based on an environment where relationship is key and central. And it's very interesting because when I read that a book called Research is Ceremony by Sean Wilson, I was crying almost because the way that he was talking about what knowledge means, what relationship means, what meaning is in existence, it resonated with me in Montessori. So I'm playing with those ideas because if that might be one way to explain to parents what it is that's different about Montessori. There's so much based on, and it's just imbued with relationship. And so I just wanted to share that, and feel free to respond or whatever.
Darren, you've been very quiet today, and you're usually not. Would you like to chip in on anything? No? Okay. Well, so much of the original topic of this day, and if you feel it would be useful, I would be delighted to reach out and try to gather old friends like Christine and Elizabeth Slade and Ann Epstein and Maria Ava Chafin and so forth to have a deeper conversation, or shall we say, a lively discussion about whether we can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's down.
I think bringing them in, personally, and in a leadership position, I love hearing more information from more perspectives.
Mhm.
And I feel like the more information I hear and the more perspectives I hear within the, experience realm, and sometimes it's different experiences, the more the better I can use the information I have, and the better I can apply the information to the people in front of me. So I personally would love that.
Easy enough to do. I will reach out, and this is more typically the kind of thing we would do on Thursday, but it really does have to do with the idea of admissions and recruitment and the building of your community.
Yeah.
The other thing is the whole issue, how do you create a supportive community? Because one of the things that my friend Ann Epstein always talks about is when a family begins to believe or is told that their child has a special need, they will typically go into a process of mourning as if they've been told their child has cancer.
Yes.
It's very, very traumatic. And I remember for myself when my son Mark, who now runs CGMS, when Mark was 4, we began to realize he had emotions that were out of control. And he'd be the first to tell you he is severely ADHD. And he used to describe it to me as a younger adult that it was like driving a Volkswagen Beetle on a frozen lake in February. In other words, you just spun out of control the minute you try to apply the brakes. And it's not that you couldn't get anywhere. It's just, you just didn't have the normal ability to change direction or to slow down. You had to be careful. But I remember when we began to have him diagnosed and we didn't know if it was what it was. When eye tracking things, that was an age where a lot of people were doing muscular memory training for eyes and so forth. I mean, he was reading fine and he was very, very verbal at 2, but he was out of control. He would cry. I remember one day he had a fall leaf and it got crumbled up, and we couldn't calm him down for hours, totally out of control. And when his psychiatrist, Aaron Ament, told his mother and me that we needed to go on some kind of medication,
Mm.
we were of the ilk that said, not our child, you're not going to do that to. And we did finally. I mean, Aaron slowly calmed me down and convinced me that I need to shut up and just listen. Um, but Mark again later said, it would be like denying someone who has diabetes insulin. You
Mm.
really, if you need
Yes.
it, you need it.
You
He
need it.
also pointed out that if he gave me the same Ritalin type drug, I'd be hyper. And for him, it calmed him down. And that's the
Mm.
idea of following the child. So the point is that the idea of how we support families when we're starting to give them bad news or maybe giving them bad news, and how do we support them in all the agony that they go through? There's a great book written by Sally Smith of the Lab School of Washington called No Easy Answers.
Mm.
Maybe out of print because it was probably written 30 years ago. Excellent book. She My ex-wife Neela was her second in command until she retired. The Lab School of Washington and the Kingsbury School of Washington are fantastic resources for people that are trying to support kids. I know in every city there are such schools. I keep saying to Montessorians who are interested in this, set up a school to deal with children that need help because we need more of these special needs schools. It's one thing to talk inclusion. It's another thing to set up a proper support system to get them really successful. The bottom line is we as school leaders need to understand what it feels like to be a parent. How do we navigate the complicated waters of getting these kids evaluated so we really know what's going on and what needs to be done? Um, there's a lot of people out there trying to sell all kinds of solutions which may or may not be the right fit. And it is a puzzle. It's like solving the New York Times crossword puzzle. You go down a lot of hallways before you find the right solution that really helps a child to become everything that they can be. Now, does every child deserve that? Yeah.
Yes.
Can every teacher do it? Probably not. And is
No.
every parent willing to work with us? No.
No. No.
And so I think that's what we're trying to do is to find ways of increasing our stretch without overwhelming us, our school, or we don't want our parents running away. And Margot, I'm sure you have seen
Right. Oh
parents
yeah.
leave your school.
They there's in my history, and I've been around as long as you have, Tim. Because we are of the same age.
Yep.
Um, and there's nothing worse that when you have a class, and I hate to use the word disruption, but it's the one that comes to mind. With a child who disrupts at any level that classroom, either gelling or being able to work together or the speed at which it can go, it is a horrible disservice to what is the majority of your class in most cases. Um, and and parents, when they're paying for it, especially, they're going to go where that kind of disruption does not exist. Because why should they put their child through it? And it's a horrible thing when you see a poor child who, for whatever reason, this has not been a good fit, and and is disruptive. Because I think one of the things that hasn't been talked about as much is we talk about special needs or divergency and all that kind of stuff, but everybody sort of avoids talking about the behavior side of it, and that is just as important, if not more so, than the academic side of it. Because through the years, again, Tim, same way you have. Yes, we've taken children who are developmentally behind. We've taken children who don't talk. We've taken children who don't speak English when they come to us. We take children who are on the spectrum. And what makes the difference between whether it's successful or not is the behavior side of it.
Mark, I could not agree with you more. I think that more and more of the kids that people are concerned about are kids whose behavior more than their learning. Renee, I see you got a hand up.
No,
Just jump in.
you can finish. I just had Margot just made a thought come in my mind, which I want to share before we end. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the other thing is, we're talking about the child with needs right now. And another thing I've just been kind of brought forward in the last couple of months is classroom management, which is really teacher training. And I attended, it might have been the AMS conference, I don't know where, recently, and Anna Perry did a great presentation on how do we support our teachers. So I think all of us should think about supporting our teachers to be at their potential as well. Many of the teaching programs now are hybrid. So the number of hours they're really getting in relationships, as Karen said, talking things out, practicing is way less than they used to get in training. And so, because we have a shortage of teachers, I'm assuming that a lot of schools have fairly new teachers leading classrooms. And I think the hardest thing is the classroom management, how to begin each school year and how to manage children within that and how that's more important than getting into the work on the shelves. So it's just it was a flashlight, a light bulb, Margot, when you were talking about that, is that I think we should be focusing a lot more PD on supporting our teachers on how to open those classrooms every school year and classroom management skills in general, because they're not getting as much as they used to. And as we know, we have a different group of children now. So we need more classroom management, which could in effect really help more children if the structure is
Yeah.
there, the choice within structure, so to speak.
I have a couple things real quick.
Please.
One is a book that I really like that I believe is still in print is Hallowell's When You Worry About the Child You Love. And I think that while he has dyslexia, I think that's mostly ADHD. But I can relate to it as a parent. I have 4 kids, and 3 of them are ADHD, different types within ADHD, and one of the 3 also has dyslexia. Um, in terms of the child's perspective, Nowhere to Hide is written by a student, a neurodiverse student. This is it's not older than Hallowell's, but it's probably 10 years ago, at least. That is the student's perspective on how much energy it takes to override your normal through the course of the day. And then, Renee, what popped up when you were talking about classroom management is what we've done for classroom management is really leaned into communication books. And one of the more recent ones we did is What We Say and How We Say It Matter. Because sometimes it isn't the ask, it's the phrasing of it. And I talk about this with staff all the time. The difference I get when I say let's, and I work with 2 3s up through our elementary, but the difference I get in a response if I say, let's go, whatever, or go do this. It's just night and day. And I'm not capitulating. I'm not, it's the same thing. It's just more collaborative. And sometimes that really impacts the outcome.
It's a great topic, and I think it's well said. In today's Apple News, and I'm not sure which publication they picked it up from, might be the Atlantic. The thing that is, I think the title of it is something like, Did American Positive Discipline Ruin French Parenting? I highly recommend the article. And basically, the gist is France traditionally had a rule that, just tell kids that's not okay. In
Right.
other words,
No.
when you have a child, you have a life, you're going to continue on as an adult, and your child is not going to be the center of your universe. And you're going to teach them eat what's on their plate and all that good stuff. And it's a very, very instructive article because it basically rips a new one of positive discipline, positive parenting. Um, and it's a very reasoned article, but it looks in depth, as many of those articles do, at the whole history of this thing. I think when I hear people talking about today's children, we forget that the children we've always seen, some of them came from homes where they learned to be polite, and some of them just were naturally like golden retrievers, kind, and others
Mhm.
are really, kind of mean little buggers.
Mhm.
And we have to, you take a kid from where they are and I always love as a dog person, like this is Elmo. Elmo is a Russian toy terrier. He will bark ferociously at a leaf. Um, his uncle came in the door a minute ago, and I thought you probably couldn't hear him because of the wonders of Zoom and its ability to screen out background noise. He was going crazy. He's a very good dog, but he is disruptive and he makes life crazy. It really, you have to really know, how do we teach kids to be polite? And Renee, your point about teacher training and classroom management and teaching kids how to behave correctly is really important because, first off, positive discipline is often misunderstood. It's kind of like, the kid's a little bugger and he's not behaving, and we're just kind of saying, that's not a good idea. He knows he's beating up on his sister. So we have to be a little bit more directive than just allowing them to express themselves. So the idea, how do we create the conditions where children normalize more quickly, where they feel that relationship, which really is, children will do anything for people they love. Um, and we also have to teach them how to behave. And teaching children how to de-escalate or how to break away from conflict and how to behave themselves, even when they're really, really angry or hurt or afraid. These are all the things of adult life. And so I could not agree more that our classrooms benefit from strong support for teachers in how to do this practically and how to be consistent, in my opinion, before the school year begins. It's my probably the thing that I'm asked to do the most, is this whole issue of how to get your classroom off to the right start. So we do a lot of professional development for faculty of the very specific way of forging those relationships and getting that classroom working before the school day starts, the first day, and through the first 90 days of school.
Yeah.
And a lot of pieces to it. And there's no one way to do it. Don't get me wrong. But the bottom line is, you're right. The average teacher today needs all the help they can get. And they need to be very clear there are no bad dogs, which is why I brought Elmo out here. These kids are capable of doing it. That doesn't mean we can meet the need of every kid or every parent or every child's special need, but the children are capable. It's just we may not know how to do it, and we definitely could do a. It would be good if we stopped asking what sun sign were they born under, if we started saying they should have been born under a stop sign. Hi, Karen.
I I just was thinking about your example of animals, using animals as a connection to understanding behaviors and how to interact. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Monty Roberts, and it's called Join Up. He is someone who worked with wild stallions off of the Sierra Nevada plains, and he could have a wild stallion saddled and with a rider in half an hour. And that's because he studied the language of the horse, and he understood how to move his body and how the horse's ears work and what they do, etc. And it's so amazing and it's so reassuring and calming. And I can see that connected to how some of these kids come into us, and how do we respond to them? How do we learn to be present with them in the space that they're in, and then move them safely and calmly into the next space? It's a beautiful thing. I even showed it to my students in adolescent program when we were studying Indigenous philosophy, because that's a lot of what that's about. Yeah.
Well, Karen, that's something else you and I have in common. I know him well, or I know of his work. I've taken his workshops, and I couldn't agree more. Renee.
So my other quick thought is that um, helping teachers recognize that classroom management is through the prepared environment. It's not disciplining the children, right? And if we take that time in those first 6 weeks, 90 days, whatever it is that whatever model people want to follow, and put in a lot of practical life, a lot of rolling of the rugs, a lot of all the things that we do, it pays off for the rest of the school year. And you almost can't get it back if you don't begin that way. And I feel like many teachers are missing some of that, who are coming, quickly out of training that was half online and half not. And I'm all about just get the training, right? But it all relates back to the prepared environment and why we called it the children's house, right? Because it's really about them. And Tim, I think you just said, what child is not going to do what the adult they love wants them to do? If we say we put this material here, we take it out gently, we unroll our rug, we put it on, and then you do your work. I mean, they're going to follow that. So anyway, that's
Also,
just, and
sorry,
lots of
I was
practical
going to
life in the
say
beginning of the year.
practical life makes such a difference. I
I
found the
know.
classrooms that shy away from practical life and mopping and scrubbing, holy moly,
That's
I
right.
find that to be a horrible
Yeah,
thing.
and
I
that's the hardest
just,
thing to sell parents on, right?
yes,
You know what's
it's
cool?
such an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's
it's a New
there's
York
a
Times article, Tim.
Yeah, I
thank
saw
you.
you.
I've been
Thanks
sitting
for,
here finding it.
yeah, thank
There's
you
a
for doing
movie
that.
that's there's a movie that's out, and it's probably been out for a few years, but it's called Let the Child Be the Guide, and it's from in
Yeah.
France,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
so amazing. I
Mhm.
would say show parents some of that movie, make it a requirement before they come in, so that they understand, they see what Montessori does. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
By the way, the first issue of Montessori Family Life for the year is going to come out. It's going to be weekly starting this year. And the new Montessori Family Alliance is really hyped up with, AI, and my Abigail is there to help parents and so forth. But we're going to be really trying to do everything we can to, one, get parents on board, and to try to help teachers at the same time. And I think a lot of things we're talking about today, these kinds of issues that we've just been speaking about. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Sharon. This is good stuff. This is great. And this is what we're going to be trying to do with the several thousand parents that are part of the Alliance now. So we'll watch out for that. It'll come out on July 1st, and it'll go to all of you because we're going to send out the whole email list, not just
Oh,
the
nice.
members.
Sure.
Well, this has been lovely. I can't thank you enough for this great topic, and let's do this more often. I will reach out to my friends who are the gurus. I'll see if Chip's around and Jane's around, and all the usual suspects, Ann Epstein, and I'll see who can join us. I will add one other thing. We talked earlier today, Marga, you brought up the issue of these children with special needs, and you may have been on workshops where I mentioned this before, but let me just do it again because I forget who attends Thursday and who attends Tuesdays. I know on Thursdays we've done a lot of stuff with MEFS, which is the MEFS, Minnesota Executive Function Scale from Reflection Sciences. I highly recommend that any school use it regularly. I highly recommend Chansey and Bruce. Chansey and Bruce has a weird name if you've never heard of them. They are the best way of diagnosing what's going on with a young child that I know of today. Most people talk about Brigance, they talk about the Gazelle developmental scales, they talk about Dibbles. Those, they're great, but they don't measure anywhere near what Chansey and Bruce does. And Chansey and Bruce is not going to get your kid an IEP. It is not a whisk but it's affordable, it's quick, It gives the kind of information you want when you're looking at a prospective incoming 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old. It helps you to get a very in-depth look at what's going on with a kid. The report that the parents get back is amazing. It's exactly what you want to calm parents down or to get them on your side. And it is, while it's not going to be accepted by your local education authority to get children an IEP, it is absolutely going to get them the support they need from the parents and from you. And it's going to give you and your teachers the information you want. And then I'll add in DERS, DERS, the Developmental Environmental Rating Scale from the National Center for Montessori in the public sector. By the way, National Center provides subscriptions for schools to both DERS and MEFS at the same time. So if you go to their website, you can look at how that works. And I really believe in using these things as interrelated tools. They're marvelous, marvelous things that really increase our ability to understand what's going on, to reinforce what we think we're seeing from our observations, and to be able to have a conversation with parents. So,
Tim,
yeah,
first of all, Thursday's webinar was excellent. And second of all, you just had an article about Chancey and Bruce and MEFs. Was it on LinkedIn or was it somewhere else in case anyone wants to look at it?
Thanks, Lisa. Generally speaking, I'm putting everything I'm writing on LinkedIn because the profession is generally seeing it there. Whereas I put it on the Montessori Foundation website, I get a much smaller readership. So I'm putting it on both typically. And then I guess you all are seeing that once a week, I'm sending out to our email list a weekend read from the Montessori Foundation.
I love that, just so you know.
Thanks.
I think it's a great weekend read.
Well, we're trying, we're slowly building up. I think years ago we were saying we wanted to create like a TV station where 24 hours a day there'd be different people like me talking about stuff and building up more and more video. So we're working on it. So I'm doing 2.5 of these things a week. So on Wednesdays, every other week, I do something in partnership with Illumine, which is aimed at the Montessori early childhood community and the childcare community. So there's a lot going on and more coming.
Cool.
So thank you. Appreciate it. And again, any of you who want to share something that, Karen, I know you've shared things and a lot of you have. We're happy to have it. It'll go on our blog. I'm happy to repost on LinkedIn. We don't publish Montessori leadership anymore, but I'm starting to fire out more and more stuff. And I think you may have heard about the Circle, which is essentially going to become our affiliate group of school leaders, Montessori and non-Montessori, who just want to talk with each other about school leadership issues down and dirty without having to feel shame. So more coming. I'm so glad you all were here, and I really appreciate, Margaret, you bringing this up. There's nothing I was going to talk about this week. Can't wait for some other week. It wasn't that important. All right. Thanks,
We can
everyone.
always talk about this week next week.
We can.
That way you don't have to prepare a different topic.
I'll push it forward. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Glad to see you all. Bye-bye.